After you, sir.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
So I just start by telling you the format that we're going to have today. Alexey's going to sit in this chair, and I'm going to sit in this chair. And I'm going to ask Alexey questions. He's going to ask me questions. And hopefully I'll ask him some questions that he doesn't like me to ask him, so we'll get some interesting answers. So my first question is, Alexey, in 1984, how did you come up with Tetris?
Well, it was in 1984, and I was a researcher and programmer in Computer Center of Academy of Science of USSR. It was still USSR. And I did a lot of programming and research in computer science, but really my heart was in puzzles and riddles and all this funny stuff out of mathematics. So in my spare time, I tried to put together some games for the computer, and Tetris was one of them. I always enjoyed the very well-known puzzle called Pentamina. It's a box with different shapes made out of 5 squares. So that's about all you could do out of 5 squares, which is on the screen. It's 12 different shapes. And it's a wonderful set for puzzles. You take it, you rearrange it, you put some kind of beautiful shapes out of it. But when you try to put it back in the box, you're going to spend a good hour probably for that. It's really complicated puzzle. So I admired this puzzle for all my childhood and all my life. And once I decided that it would be a very good set to put together two-player board game on computer. And I start programming it, and you know, that time the procedures, all the procedures the programmer must do himself. It was no any libraries or anything like that at that time. So when I put those routines to arrange the stuff on the screen, and I saw how the pieces rotated there, it was very funny to watch. And that was the moment when I think that the real-time game with those pieces would be something interesting to try. That's how it started. So, and what did you think when you saw the Tetris first time? When was it?
So it was here in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show in 1988, and I had a publishing company in Japan at the time, and I was looking for games to bring back to Japan. So I would go from machine to machine, play the games a little bit, and then try to talk with the publishers of those games. And when I first stopped at Tetris, I looked at it. It looked too simple. But I'm a puzzler myself, so I said, well, you know, let me give it a try. So I went and I played. And the next time I had a break between meetings, I found myself standing in line again. And then I found myself standing in line again. And by about the 4th time that I stood in line waiting to play this game, I realized that I was hooked. And it's very hard to get hooked on a game at a game show, because generally it takes too long to get hooked to a game. And I was hooked. So there was something about it. And so that's when I started negotiating, and that's how my first look at Tetris. So in the first prototype of Tetris, was there anything that you didn't like and changed?
Well, you know, no. I was very lucky to find very appropriate kind of features for all the mechanics. I like the pieces, I like the size of the board. I still like it. 20 by 10 is kind of perfect for this stuff. I was really scared to do something with the scoring system. I was really scared to overcomplicate it. So the further changes were very useful for it. So what we did for for Game Boy version with double, triple, and Tetris was really important step in the game. But since the concept of the game didn't change too much, we add some other little stuff in the game, which is little but important. But the main mechanics is still there. Yeah, so. And do you remember when you first get to Electronorg Technica? And that's funny. I'm curious, would you do it again today if you could?
Okay, so I have to explain what Electronorg Technica actually is. You know, when I licensed Tetris from Spectrum Holobyte for PC, there was a whole long chain of companies in the copyright notice. And so it went from Academy Soft, which is the Academy of Science, to Electronorg Technica, which is still, it's a trade organization in Moscow. And from there, it went to Andromeda, which was a Hungarian company. From there, it went to Mirrorsoft, which is a UK company. And from Mirrorsoft, it went to Spectrum Holobyte. And from Spectrum Holobyte, a US company, it went to me in Japan. And so Electronorg Technica was in that copyright notice. And so I tracked them down in Moscow. I had an interpreter. I hired an interpreter, and I tracked down the building. And I said, let's go. And she said, no. I said, what do you mean, no? She says, you can't go in there. And I said, what do you mean I can't go in there? She said, you're not invited. You need an official paper. You need to have written them. And I said, I didn't come all this way to stand in front of a door and not go inside, you know? So I said, I'm going in. Are you coming with me? And she said, no, I'm not. I thought, wow, that's pretty weird. Okay, fine. Anyway, I walked through the door, and I said, I'm the guy who published Tetris in Japan. I held up my box. And this little old man comes walking down. Little old man turned out to be not so old. He was my age. He looked like a little old man, Mr. Belikov. Mr. Belikov walks down the stairs, shakes my hand, and says, and they all have this vice grip. All the Russians do vice grip handshake, you know. And he asked me, what do you do? I says, I publish Tetris in Japan for the Nintendo machine. And he looked at my package, and he says, we never licensed this game to the console. And I'm going like, holy smokes. Say a nice word there. Holy smokes. Because at that moment in time, I had 200,000 cartridges in manufacture. That's $10 a piece. That's $2 million. That was all of the land that my in-laws had at the time that I'd use as collateral to borrow money to get Nintendo to build these cartridges. And if I didn't get paid from distribution, like if somebody came and said, stop the press right there, I would have lost $2 million. It's way more money than I had. Anyway, that's what I walked into. And after I sort of like choked, I decided to focus on the matter at hand. I'm here to license the rights for Game Boy, and we'll talk about the other rights later. And would I do that today? No, I guess a lot of it had to do with naivety at the time. So, it's like going to North Korea today and trying to license a North Korean game. You just don't do it. But anyway, do you remember meeting me for the first time?
Oh, of course I do. Day before, they say that's a kind of strange small potato businessman should come visit. Would I like to meet him or not? I say, yes, well, I do. So I try to cooperate with Electronorg Technica at that time, and we kind of work together, try to put all this publishing kind of together. And when I saw you, the first impression was kind of inspired by this kind of introduction. I see young Asian guy who was very scared and whatever. So I did think that something serious coming. I think it's just polite small talks or kind of attempt to grab some piece of property or whatever. But when you start talking, I realized that first time I met the real game designer because the knowledge of the stuff and the passion for the game is something you can't hide. So we start like each other right away, being surrounded with all these bureaucrats. And was it hard? Was it hard to get all these rights for Tetris that time? Was it?
It was the biggest deal that I had ever done till that time, or it was going to be the biggest deal, and I was doing it under duress because I knew that that I would be dead meat if I'd lost my in-laws their property. I spent a week or 10 days. After being there for like 2 days, they asked me, when are you coming back? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, we'd like to have time to think over your offer. I said, no, I'm not coming back. Either I leave here with the rights or I leave here without the rights, but I'm not coming back. I don't have that kind of time. I could feel from the way they were doing things that they'd never really done business deals before, or normal business deals anyway. And so I decided that I was going to play their game, which was to be a little heavy-handed, and I, as legalese as possible, made them an offer. And this offer is, if it's not, how can I say, if you don't do a counter within so many days, this offer is null and void, and I use these big words and so on. A few days into it, I realized I was going somewhere, I was getting somewhere. And I phoned my attorney in Japan, and I said, listen, and a phone call at this time takes 8 hours. You call the operator, ask for the call, and then you have to wait by the phone for 8 hours. And during that 8 hours, your call could come through any time. And so you have to be there, otherwise the 8 hours starts from scratch. So I'd been waiting for 8 hours, and finally the call got through. I said to my lawyer, this is the fax number. Yeah, I want you to write me a 20-page contract. So give me all the rights from the Russians that I need to give Nintendo the rights. So it has to satisfy Nintendo. No more than 20 pages, because and no big words. I'm going to have to explain every word in this contract. And we're not going to have a second shot at it. So it has to be a fair contract. Fair for them, fair for me. And so 24 hours later, I got the best contract I've ever seen in the industry.
That is true.
And it was great. So.
Yeah. And how did you deal with Nintendo afterwards? Was it hard to get to work on the Game Boy version and
so stuff? Yeah, I made the deal with Nintendo, and they. Mr. Harakawa said that he was going to include it in every Game Boy that he sold everywhere in the world except Japan, where they didn't have the policy of packing in a game. I had to pretend to Nintendo, because I really was a small potato at the time, that the Russians, which was supposedly this big tough organization, which actually it wasn't, were not going to accept this and this and this. So I did things, and I apologize to all of you who played Game Boy Tetris, but I forced them to put my copyright screen on this, displayed for 4 seconds. So after 4 seconds, you can click through, and if you didn't do anything, it would stay up for 8 seconds. And of course, I made all that stuff up. And then, like the 2 days or 3 days before they were going to master, I'm playing what they're mastering, and the random number generator was wrong. One of the pieces was coming out twice as much almost as the other pieces. And so I told my guys to count them and show me the frequency, and they did. And I called Nintendo, said, this is not going to pass. The Russians are not going to accept, because the random number generator is not random. And if you're looking at a game like Mario, it doesn't matter, because the game doesn't need any real random numbers. And in fact, no games at the time needed a real random number generator. Well, they came on Saturday, and we worked all day and fixed their random number generator so it was random. and they mastered on Monday. So, yeah, I pretended to be a little bit bigger than I was in talking to Nintendo and in talking to the Russians. In looking at our history with Tetris, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Well, you know, usually this question is asked about the fact that I give up my rights for Tetris for my computer center for 10 years. And that was the main thing everybody suppose I'm complaining about. But you know, I wouldn't do it differently even now because it wasn't it was a strategic decision which I did right, and I am kind of proud of my kind of vision that time, because otherwise if I start kind of fighting for my royalty or for my rights, Tetris would be surrounded by war, but not the peace. But because of this my step, we kind of conglomerate the efforts, and everybody helped me to publish it rather than stop me from it. So basically, I wouldn't do differently if it happens again. But I did a lot of really sloppy steps at that time because I was naive and unexperienced, that's for sure. And what about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. You know, I could see that a lot of the things that I did were due to inexperience, but they ended up being really important lessons in the end. And I didn't do anything along the way which made me lose the ability to publish Tetris or make the Tetris company or lose your friendship, for example. So I think that, you know, just by keeping it simple and saying, well, look, the most important relationship in the whole Tetris business is the relationship between me and Alexey. And it has been since the very beginning. He's the guy who made the game, and I'm the guy who helped to make money out of it. So that's a real good combination, and we don't like step on each other's feet, not that often and not that hard. So I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah. I think that that I'm with you on this point. That the business, the friendly business relationship was the key moment in the history of Tetris as a product, and as a game, as a part of culture.
Look at me, I don't have a beard yet.
And do you think it's still important now?
What, the friendship?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most important thing. You know, with the friendship and the trust, yeah, everything else, you know, the contracts and all that, that's all my weasels talking to somebody else's weasels, and sorry if there's any weasels out there. but they're necessary. But at the end of the day, it's a handshake. It's a look in the eye. It's just a much simpler relationship. And I don't know where we are in the business today, whether that still works or not. But it sure worked for us. So, gosh, I got to find my next one. There it is. In addition to relationships, how important is holding on to your intellectual property?
Wow, I think it's a key moment for Tetris to be still alive. I think that's how we were able to maintain such a strong brand for years and keep it strong, interesting, and modern. Because if the property change hands all the time, it's rather dies soon. So I feel that the fact that we own intellectual property and protect it strongly really give the game life and inspiration. That's for sure.
Yeah. So the fact that I licensed it to Nintendo early on, and Nintendo turned around and registered the copyrights and trademark in like 70 countries. That was a huge thing. You know, normally upstart game designers or small potatoes, as you call me, don't have the wherewithal to register and to do all of that, patent, trademark, copyright stuff. And so it was a really important thing to protect us around the world to make that alliance with Nintendo. But it was a two-way street.
Yeah. So Tetris is still very popular over the world, obviously. So do you think it can be still the games which kind of have such a broad appeal to all culture?
Yeah, so if you create a game that is, Tetris is one way to do it. It's a game which is more geometrical than anything else. And so because it's geometrical, geometry doesn't change depending on what country you live in. It's all, every country lives along the same laws of physics and the same geometry. Not so when it comes to games which involve a lot of culture. So, for example, if you look at movies made in India and movies made in Hollywood, they appeal to different audiences. And somehow the TV landed on that channel, and my wife said, "What are you doing? Why are you watching this?" And it's just interesting to watch other culture stuff. But with games, it doesn't necessarily translate. So what you think is funny may not be funny or maybe even offensive someplace else. And so that's much more difficult to research when you're building a game which contains characters and language and I don't know, those kinds of things. So the simpler you make your game, the more likely it is to be cross-cultural. That's my thinking on this. Now, I know you still play Tetris, but what are some of your favorite games? What are some of the favorite games you play today?
Well, I still checking my account for World of Warcraft time to time. I spent lots of time on it. So I play all kind of game, but still my heart is in puzzles. So I check all the puzzles. I try to not miss the important puzzles which is coming up. And now it's a really great time for puzzles actually, because casual player it's the most favorable genre. So I still play Bejeweled, like Zuma, very like Cubis, the only real 3D puzzle in my collection at least. Flow is a very good game, Threes. So all those puzzles are on my iPad, and I never leaving it. So that's how it works.
Your turn.
My turn. Yeah, no, it's your turn.
Or is it?
It's your turn.
It's my turn. Oh my gosh. They had two questions in a row. Looking back at what you've done over the past 30 years, what's one piece of advice you have for a developer just starting out with their new game or big idea?
I really hate to give advice, so I have just only one of them. In order to achieve really great goal and really come up with the good game, you need not just analyze everything and have just desire to be the first and to make the best game. You need to really fall in love with what you do. So if you don't have this feeling, you do probably the very good game, probably kind of excellent game, but it will be never be kind of outrageously and kind of legendary game at all. So fall in love with what you do. That would be my advice. And what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so my background is role-playing games. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons in college, and people around me used to look at me and say, "Why are you wasting so much time on this stupid game?" And well, I ended up making the first role-playing game in Japan, and so my advice is, don't listen to other people, first of all, because other people are not walking your life and they're not standing in your shoes. And if it was easy and you were going to do something that somebody else already did, then everybody would be doing it, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be amazing. You know, to be a true artist, you have to do something that hasn't been done before. And so you need to search your I don't know, your mind, your history, your environment for things that you think are interesting, and put those into a game and make something original. And I think that is and then don't back down. Just keep on going on it, because it's the originality, the creativity, that is the thing that will make you stand out in the end. It's the reason this man is sitting here today.
Well, okay. So what do you think is next for Tetris?
So, what do I think is next for Tetris? I think that Tetris is going to become a sport. Maybe someday it can be an Olympic sport. Because I think that the time for computer games as being, quote unquote, waste of time pastimes, I think that time is past. And we need to think seriously. If you go back to 100 years ago, what did people do? They played sports because they needed to prepare themselves for a lifetime of physical activity. But today, when we play computer games, what are we preparing ourselves for? We're preparing ourselves for a future in which most of what we do is going to be inside of virtual worlds. And so the practice of playing computer games, which all happen in virtual worlds, I think is exactly what our children need to prepare themselves for that lifetime of virtual labor. So I think that Tetris will become a sport, and I think hopefully it'll be in the Olympics. We have some wood somewhere. So I have one last question for you that isn't in the script, because we're out of questions. And so my question to you is, did anyone ever threaten you to put you in jail if you didn't sign a paper?
Was one time, and I tried to retain a very small piece of Tetris rights for myself, and they really threatened me. But you pushed me away from this.
It was merchandising rights, by the way.
Well,
And
at that point, it looked really teeny piece of everything.
yeah. And I said, come to the States. Do not spend a day in jail. You will not prove anything to anyone by doing this. And so I think it turned out okay.
Yeah. It
So
was.
in wrapping up, I wanted to show you the first professional Tetris player.
And when the credits are rolling, I need absolute silence. I just can't do it, and I promise it'll be really cool.
This video went viral, I think, 2 weeks ago.
All right.
This is
One more. There we go.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Quiet.
Oh, that's them talking. So he's reached the end of the game, and now the pieces at the bottom of the well are invisible. So while the credits are scrolling, you can't see the pieces down the bottom. So he knows where they are. He's that good.
Ooh, big mistake.
Yeah, I say insane.
That's the future sport.
And if you're wondering whether it's a spectator sport,
No go.
Well,
Yes!
here's the answer.